The only way that you can move along the curve is a change in quantity. And the only way the curve can move by itself is if your like the company's income goes up.
No, let me say it differently. Okay. The only way you move along the curve is a change in the price.
Oh, okay.
The movement along the curve results in a change in the quantity, yeah. But it's really the change in the price which is causing the movement here.
All right. I just had quantity written down instead of price.
Yeah, that's fine. Then what causes a shift in the curve is any of those other factors that affect demand, things like tastes and preferences. Suppose the Surgeon General announces that a study has just found that people that eat an orange every day live longer lives, right? What would that do probably to the demand for oranges?
Make it go up.
It would go up. So no matter what the price of oranges was, people would now be buying more than they did before, which is another way of saying the demand curve shifts to the right. Okay, so income, tastes and preferences, the prices of related goods like substitutes and complements. When any of those things change, then the whole demand curve shifts left or shifts right, depending on whether it's an increase or a decrease. All right, any questions?
Is there any way that the slope of the curve would shift by like an effect onto the curve?
Okay, Justin, the answer is not in our class.
Okay.
Okay, so all the shifts you can think of is basically parallel. In the real world, the slope may change, but it's not a big deal.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? I'm not trying to go fast here. I'm just not hearing any questions, and so I'm moving on until you tell me differently. Okay, now, what we're going to do is tell the same basic story, but instead of demand, we're going to look at supply. And it all works the same way. What's a supply curve show? Morgan, since you were so good at that last time.
Isn't it like, it shows like how much a producer's willing to supply?
At different prices, yeah. So it's the relationship between price and how much the producer is willing to supply. Okay? The higher the price, the more the producer is going to want to supply, because higher prices mean it's more profitable. So they'll make even more money by supplying more when the price goes up. Okay? Okay, so let's pick a price like $150. Okay? If the price is $150, how do we use the graph to tell us what the quantity supplied is going to be?
You just read across to where it intersects.
Right. You start at the y-axis, you find the price of $150, you draw your dotted line to the right until you bump into the supply curve. When you hit the supply curve, you turn 90 degrees and you go down to the x-axis and you read the quantity. So what's the quantity supplied if the price is $150? Matt?
150?
Matt? If the price is $150, what does the supply curve say the quantity supplied is going to be?
190.
Yeah, it's 190. See, there isn't actually a dot there, but it is pretty clear. That's where the two curves, that's where the curve lies, right? A price of 150 and a quantity of 190. Reem, do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, now, suppose we pick a different price. Suppose we pick a price of $200. You find the quantity supplied in the same way. You start from the y-axis, you find the price of 200, you draw your dotted line over until you bump into the supply curve, then you read down off the x-axis, and what is the quantity supplied?
$270.
It is 270, exactly. Okay, so how do we describe what we did here? Well, we describe it as a movement along the supply curve. What caused the movement along the supply curve? What's the only thing that causes a movement along the supply curve?
Change in price.
It's a change in the price.
So I guess it's important to note that this is the selling or market price, not the production price, right?
It is the market price. It's not the cost of production. Yes, correct. Somebody's having a party. I bet that's Courtney. Okay. Now, what would cause the supply curve to shift?
Changes in the cost of producing something?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So let's pick a number. Okay. Let's suppose the price is $200. And at a price of $200, the quantity is 270. I picked that point because it has a dot on the graph. That's easy to see. Now, let's suppose that the cost of making a computer chip just went up by $25. The way I think about this is I say the same quantity, 270 units, instead of costing $200, is now $225. Okay, so it's as if, literally as if the whole supply curve shifts up by the $25 increase in the cost. What's really going on here is the producer is trying to get the customers to pay that additional cost. So they're going to raise their price by the amount of the cost and hope that people will buy it anyway. Okay, so an increase in the cost of production translates into a vertical shift or a leftward shift. If you want to think of it left to right, it's a leftward shift in the supply curve. If costs go up, supply goes down. That's what we just described. If costs go down, supply goes up. The curve shifts to the right or it shifts down on the graph.
Wait, did you say that if cost goes up, then what goes down? Is that what you said? And what did you say?
Well, supply goes down, but the way we show that is, okay, let's go back to our price of $200 and our quantity of 270. If the cost goes up by $25, so the chip maker has to spend $25 more per chip, okay, then what they're going to want to do in order to produce the same quantity is they're going to want a $25 increase in the price. So that's as if that point there shifts up by $25. Now, there's another way to look at it. Suppose customers say, we're not going to pay a penny more than $200. Then what is the chip maker going to do? Probably.
He's probably going to supply less.
They are. They're going to supply less. Maybe they're going to supply, let's see, 240 units. So it would be 200, price of $200, quantity of 240 units. So either way, we're going to be on a new supply curve that is either above or to the left of the old supply curve. Above and to the left is the same thing.
I have to go back to work.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Professor.
Sure. Thanks for coming.
No problem.
Yep. Just before the punchline, too. Okay. Any questions before we go on? All right. Now, let's put the pieces together. Let's go to a third graph. All right. So we have a demand curve, just like before. We have a supply curve, just like before. And they mean the same things, right? The horizontal axis is the quantity, and the vertical axis is the price. Okay? Let's suppose the price, in this case, it says it's gasoline. Let's suppose the price is $1.80 per gallon. If the price is $1.80 per gallon, how do you use the graph to figure out how many gallons customers want to buy?
Would you go over, like follow it over till you hit the supply curve?
Yeah, you start at the price of 180 on the vertical axis. You draw your dotted line over till you bump into the demand curve, and then you read down to the x-axis. So if the price is $1.80, what's the quantity demanded there?
500.
Say it again, Jeremiah.
500.
500, exactly. Right? So we did just what we did before. We took the price, we went over to the demand curve, we read down, that's 500. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing for supply. Okay, with demand, we're looking at customers. With supply, we're looking at businesses, right? So if the price is 180, how do you find out? How do you use the graph to find out how much businesses want to sell?
You look at the supply curve.
You start from the price on the left-hand side. You draw your dotted line over till you bump into the supply curve, and then you go straight down to the x-axis and you read the price. And in this case, the price is what?
You mean the quantity of gas would be?
Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. You start with a price of 180. What's the quantity supplied?
700.
It's about, it looks like it's a little less than 700. Okay. So now we have a situation in the market. Okay. The quantity supplied is 700. The quantity demanded is 500. So the supply is greater than the demand. Okay. What do you call a situation where the supply is greater than demand?
A surplus.
A surplus, exactly. Okay, think bathing suits in September. There's a bunch in the store, but people aren't buying them anymore because it's not the right season. Though today might have been an okay day to be out sunbathing. Okay, so we have a surplus. What do businesses do when there's a surplus in order to sell their merchandise?
Reduce the price.
They cut the price. Okay. Now start at the price of 180 and drop that price down a little bit. What you'll see, what do some consumers do when the price starts to fall? When the price goes down, some consumers who weren't willing to pay $1.80 suddenly become willing to buy after all, right? Because at a lower price, some people will get motivated to do it anyway, right? So what we're doing as the price falls is we're moving down along the demand curve from our original point of 180 and 500 kind of to the southeast. Similarly, as the price falls, we're moving along the supply curve to the southwest. Now, suppose we stop at, what is that price? 160? It's not marked on the vertical axis, but you can see the little check mark, right? At a price of 160, there is still a surplus, but it's not as big as it was before. Do you see that? The difference between the two curves is narrowed. All right. Now, let's take a step back. What caused the price to fall in the first place?
Surplus.
The existence of a surplus. Okay. The price fell a while. The surplus got smaller, but there's still a surplus. So what's going to happen to the price now?
Continue to fall.
It's going to fall some more. So here's the question. How long will the price fall?
Until supply meets demand.
Until the surplus goes away, okay? And where that occurs on this graph is at a price of 140. Because at a price of 140, the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied of 600. So at that point, we're stable, okay? Think about it this way. That price is unique. It's the only price where the plans of consumers and the plans of producers match one another. Okay, so we call that equilibrium. So the price of 140 is called the equilibrium price, and the quantity of 600 is called the equilibrium quantity. Okay, any questions? Now, what we've done there is all you really need to know in order to be able to use the supply and the demand diagram. Okay, all the pieces are there. I'll grant you that you probably don't feel completely comfortable about it yet, but that's because you need to do some practice. Okay, so let's take an example. Let's suppose Congress cuts people's income taxes. Okay, what does that do to our take-home pay?
It increases it.
It raises our take-home pay. How does that affect our demand for gasoline?
Just go up.
Right. If income affects the demand for gasoline, which it does, higher incomes mean people can now afford to buy more gasoline. How do we show that on the graph?
Shift right.
The demand curve is going to shift to the right, reflecting a higher demand. Yeah. Okay. Now notice what happens when the curve shifts. You can't see this. You're going to have to imagine it. But at the moment the curve shifts, we suddenly have a shortage, right? The quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied at the original price of 140. When there's a shortage, what happens to prices?
They raise.
They go up, right? So a shortage is just the opposite of a surplus. When there's a surplus, prices fall. When there's a shortage, prices rise, okay? So the same rules apply. As the price rises, the shortage gets smaller. The price keeps rising until it reaches the new equilibrium where the shortage has completely gone away, where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. So what we would say on this graph, kind of to summarize everything that happened, we would say there was an increase in demand, the demand curve shifted to the right, the higher demand increased the equilibrium quantity, people want gasoline more and so they buy more, and because they want more, the sellers can get away with raising the price. So we've got a shift in demand, an increase in the quantity, and an increase in the price. Okay, any questions about that? That's exactly what you're going to have to do in the homework problem. Okay, so let's move away from this picture so I can see everybody. Oh, hey, Margot. Glad you made it. All right. Okay, now there were some other issues that people raised in the module analyses. Several people asked about the algebraic approach to market equilibrium. The algebra is just an alternative way of solving the problem, but you don't need to know the algebra for my exams. You just need to know how to use the graphical analysis and to tell the story that we just went through. Okay. Now I think what I'm going to do is you guys are probably pretty fried at this point. I think I'm going to wait until next week to talk about price ceilings and price floors, but they're a straightforward application of of what we did already tonight. Okay. Anybody have any questions?
So the homework is due before the Hangouts on Wednesday.
Correct. Yes. So it's next Wednesday. So
Word.
you have a week.
Thank you.
Other questions? The silence is killing me. All right, well then I will call it a night, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Have a great night.